White House says you caved. Is that how it went down?
Well, the Liberal Party has humiliated Canada yet again. Welcome back to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. Well, it's official. Mark Carney has humiliated us yet again. He tries to flex on the campaign trail. He tries to convince everybody that he's going to be the guy that can stand up to Donald Trump because he's got a lot of money like Donald Trump does. Of course, Mark Carney uses other people's money to earn, and Donald Trump builds things on his own and then, gets money from the real estate or from the thing that has been built. And I say that because the way that they came to their money are from two very different directions, and where they came out of are two very different places. What is important is that many of us, including myself, sat here and said Mark Carney is not capable of dealing with this problem. And what he is indicating is not going to solve the issue, because the issue is not, remember that we had a lot of economic issues before Trump said that's the end of the trade. When Biden was there and the market was still trading, there was only a very few select companies that were making any money. The rest of us were still spiraling downhill into a housing crisis. There's an economy crisis, inflation. All of these things still existed. So changing this trade negotiation with Donald Trump is not going to solve the problem. Running around Europe and Asia saying, "Oh, we'll trade with you guys instead," is not going to solve the problem. Especially when you factor in that those places are all saying, geez, let's trade with the United States. But we need to lay bare here is that our leadership is not strong enough to deal with this guy. So when Donald Trump says, I've had enough of dealing with you and I'm not moving one more millimeter, he says two things. First, he says, I don't need any trade from Canada because everything that you offer me, I already have. And secondly, he says that it doesn't matter how many slogans you said on the campaign trail, Mr. Carney, you've got nothing. Because Mark Carney doesn't want to have any industrialization inside of Canada, it makes the problem worse. At least had you voted for Pierre Poilievre, we could ignore Donald Trump. Yeah, it might hurt a couple of big companies, but the small guy at least would be having a job. And remember, that's the difference, right? Mark Carney is trying to make corporations have all of the industry. Donald Trump is trying to give jobs to the middle class, to the individual, the commoner. His economy is booming. Our economy is crashing. Ask yourself, which one do you feel is the better model to follow? And then ask yourself, do you really believe you casted your vote in the right direction? I'll tell you, my issue right now is not that, because I never for once expected Mark Carney to be able to solve this problem. I said out loud that there's no way in the world Canada can win a trade war with the United States. With the state of our economy, because of the liberal policies, we can't win a trade war with Greenland. However, people out there wanted to believe that it was going to be all elbows up. Now we have a question asked of the press secretary of the White House, who answered honestly, after having heard some discussion from Donald Trump himself about how exactly they solve the issue to bring the Americans back to the table over the trade negotiation. And I don't believe for 1 second that the Canadian government is going to come out of that trade with anything that's going to help Canada. We're going to lose the steel, we're going to lose the aluminum, we're going to lose the cars. So we might as well just let it go and just focus on the country. However, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's listen to this from the pulpit press secretary and how she just laughs at Mark Carney.
Prime Minister Carney in Canada caved to President Trump in the United States of America. And President Trump knows how to negotiate, and he knows that he is governing the best country and the best economy in this world, on this planet. And every country on the planet needs to have good trade relationships with the United States. And it was a mistake for Canada to vow to implement that tax that would have hurt our tech companies here in the United States. The president made his position quite clear to the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister called the president last night to let the president know that he would be dropping that tax, which is a big victory for our tech companies and our American workers here at home.
Well, I believe that the way she summed it up is pretty straightforward. Mark Carney caved, and he dragged Canada along with us, right? So Carney and Canada caved. It's time those of you that are putting on your blinders and keeping your head in the sand understand the Liberal government is never going to solve our problems. They caused them. There's never going to be a scenario where they're going to be the ones to fix the problem. What do you think? Electric cars are going to solve the problem? Electric cars in high density are not going to solve our problems. We need jobs. We need industry. We need development. All of the things that the Liberal government is against. All of the things that Donald Trump is firing up in the United States. Some of you are out there asking, well, how can he do it? Turn off this bill. The bill has been on pause for a couple of years. They tried to implement it during the Biden administration, and then Biden told them, don't worry about it, just put it on pause and it can start to run, which of course is one of the biggest grievances that the American outfits had. Can you imagine how much money it would have been, transaction-wise, 3% would work out to for an outfit like Google or YouTube or Facebook or Netflix or Amazon, not just Amazon Prime, like not just the television, but Amazon, the corporation, or Disney, or any of a dozen other ones that I'm not, Apple. I mean, think of the amount of revenue that the federal government would have been expecting that those companies didn't even try to charge us for, because that's what you need to hear. That 3% would not be coming from the company. That would be coming from me and you. All taxes work the same, and every business model is the same. So when they say it's more money to do business, it's you and I that pay it, which means that everything around you would have gone up by 3%. The fact that in an affordability crisis, the Liberal Party was still considering this should show you just how poorly they are at going to solve these problems. If you want prosperity, you need to get the Liberal government out of the way. If you want to have inexpensive rent and money in the bank, you need to get a government in there that's going to provide you with those things. And I don't care what political stripe you come from. I don't care what group you identify with. Where in your mind is poverty the solution to any of it? Nonetheless, they're going to introduce a piece of legislation which will ask to have the bill rescinded. I'll read it here, the Canada.ca official release. Canada rescinds digital services tax to advance broader trade negotiation with the United States. Now, this first line really just gets on my nerves, and I think that whoever drafted it needs to draft something new, because I've been hearing them say it too much. Canada's new government is engaged in complex negotiations on a new economic and security partnership with the United States, focusing on getting the best deal for Canadian workers and businesses. I've been hearing them say that since, March? None of that is true, because none of that has happened, and it's taking too long. So at this time, you need to appreciate that it's not a complex negotiation. I mean, you implemented one tax. They shut it all down. There's nothing complex about it at all. Prime Minister Carney has been clear that Canada will take as long as necessary, but no longer to achieve that deal. Well, as long as necessary, but no longer, what does that even mean? Like, you would find a solution and then you'd be like, well, we'll meet in 6 months? What a ridiculous thing to say. Especially when you consider that he was on the campaign trail saying that he was going to solve it on day one. To support those negotiations, the Minister of Finance and National Revenue, Philippe Champagne, announced today that Canada would rescind the digital sales tax in anticipation of a mutually beneficial comprehensive trade agreement with the United States. Consistent with this action, Prime Minister Carney and President Trump have agreed that the parties will resume negotiations with a view toward agreeing on a deal by July 21st, 2025. So now they're trying to throw the champagne under the bus. Oh man, you can't, because they don't want Mark Carney. They need Mark Carney to maintain popularity through at least one more session of Parliament. They realize that they're not going to be able to get 4 years, but they're really hoping that they can get 2, right? However, this is going to be one of the worst Christmases in many people's memories, because the economy that we would need to get us through the winter is past. The time for that is over. The DST was announced in 2020 to address the fact that many large technology companies operating in Canada may not otherwise pay tax on revenue generated from Canadians. Canada's preference has always been a multilateral agreement related to digital service taxation while Canada was working with international partners, including the United States, on a multilateral agreement that would replace national digital service taxes. The DST was enacted to address the aforementioned taxation gap. The June 30, 2025 collection will be halted, and Minister Champagne will soon bring forward legislation to rescind the Digital Services Tax Act. Of course he's going to do all of that. What choice does he have? There's no way in the world that Facebook is all of a sudden going to cough up a couple of $1 billion. It's childish to assume that they will. It's very immature and naive to think that because they're doing business, they owe you a piece. What has to happen is we need to have more money being generated so that we don't miss these taxes. But the Liberal government doesn't want us to have jobs. That's the problem, guys. It's not got anything to do with how many how many tech companies come into Canada and make a couple of bucks here and there and everywhere else and don't pay the Liberal government their 3%. It's got everything to do with the fact that the Liberal government is run out of other people's money. They're $1 trillion in debt, or getting closer and closer every day. They're so far in debt, and so the money is so far out of control that they can't even put forward a budget. That's the thing that is a problem. It's got nothing to do with these tech companies making their money however they make it. It's just that the Liberal government can't get any tax. They've taxed the Canadian population to the hilt. So there's nothing left to take. They're tapped out. The entire country is closing in on itself. We are in a heavy-duty recession. We have been for many, many quarters. And they know it. So they're desperate to try and punish companies for being successful. Now, why? You may be asking yourself, why is it that there's so much television and all of these programs coming out of the United States? And why do we not have any Canadian one? Well, let's examine that, right? Let's remember that a fellow like Elon Musk was educated in Canada, right? His mother was born here. And yet he made all of his money in the States because the regulations in Canada are too strict. Because to get the job done in Canada, we have to navigate a million little things of control issues to make this socialist government feel like they're the ones that are actually in control, and so that they can tax you to the hilt. Meanwhile, if you zip down into the United States, you can fire up the business without too much trouble. You pay whatever it is you have to pay, normal taxes that other people pay. And then you're off to the races and you're making money. So much money that every country in the world wants to do trade with the United States. And not a single country is coming forward to trade with Canada. Let me show you a couple of examples out of this, of what I'm talking about.
We are truly coming off a historic week of President Trump racking up win after win on behalf of the American people. President Trump restored peace through strength and acted decisively as commander-in-chief to obliterate the immediate threat of the Iranian regime's nuclear capabilities, and then brokered a ceasefire between Israel and Iran, which continues to hold. Then, the president traveled to the Netherlands and achieved a monumental win for the United States and the NATO alliance by getting our allies to dedicate 5% of their GDPs to military spending.
Brokered a ceasefire between Iran and Israel, but it's the trade negotiations with Canada that are complex. Oh yeah, no, I believe you. Millions wouldn't, but I do. Come on. Let's be straightforward. Let's be honest with ourselves. Mark Carney is not capable of solving this problem. I would like to point out that during the Liberal debate, or the Liberal leadership debate, Mark Carney was saying that the American economy is already showing signs of strain and all of the other kind of things. Now, the degree of cope in that statement was pretty profound. Now, here we are a couple of months later, and let's just see if there's any proof in the pudding.
As a result of President Trump unleashing American energy dominance, summer gas prices are at the lowest they have been in 4 years, heading into the July 4th week. And with the incoming Trump economic boom, the stock market continues to roar back, with the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ both hitting record highs. And there is no inflation. And the president is right. There is historically low inflation thanks to his policies. And we will continue to drive down the cost of living in this country for Americans. We will continue to deregulate.
Record low gas prices on the 4th of July week, when there's so many people traveling right now around the country, driving around down there because the gases are so low and they're getting a lot of money in their pocket and inflation is near zero. And you can't even imagine the contrast between the two countries. Think about the fact that Canada is flat broke constantly everywhere you turn, everybody you look at. Down in the States, they got the record low gas prices. Their stock markets, two of them are breaking records going in the other direction. Inflation is near zero. He's yelling at the Fed to lower the interest rates so that people can start to borrow money against these jobs that they have at a reasonable rate. Because the more money they borrow, the more they will spend. It will stimulate the economy. When you have too high of interest rates, people don't borrow money. All of that in the face of Mark Carney saying that the American economy is starting to show signs. Come on, when are we going to admit to ourselves that the Trump knows what he's doing? And you don't have to like Republicans or conservatives or any of that. But I just want you again to answer to me why it is that your philosophy indicates that you should be flat broke. Why is it that your political slant indicates that high food prices, high rent, high crime, these are all things that are good for your standard of living? As you heard her say, they will continue to drive down the cost of standard of living for Americans. By contrast, we don't have that same thing in Canada. So now we can see the two different slants. And we can see that had we wanted to copy what Trump is doing, we would either have to have Mark Carney do a complete 180 on everything that he claims to stand for, or we would have had to have elected Pierre Poilievre. Because the deregulation, the increased spending, all of these things that the Donald Trump is doing is what Pierre Poilievre was going to do, and you all voted against that. So in reality, those of you that voted for the Liberal Party voted against prosperity. And I'm just struggling to understand why you feel that the lack of prosperity is somehow going to improve your life. Because I don't get it. From where I'm sitting, I don't understand it.
And this bill has exposed the clear differences between Republicans and Democrats in 2025. The Democrats are doubling down on craziness and radical policies that are undermining the very fabric of our country.
President Trump has made some big bill down in the States, and it's going to make a lot of tax cuts. And I just want to look at it for a second because it adds to the contrast between Carney and Trump. And it's time for those of you that were running around with the blinders on to understand the differences. Now, I don't want to go into the ins and outs of this bill that they have down there, but the Green Square says this: the one big beautiful bill delivered the largest middle and working class tax cut in U.S. history. The president's legislation will put more than $10,000 a year back in the pocket of a typical hardworking family. This is the most pro-growth, pro-worker, pro-family legislation ever crafted. $10,000 a year. By contrast, Mark Carney wanted you to be excited because he's going to give you $400 a year. If you qualified for the maximum at $400 a year, that would eventually become $800 a year 2 or 3 years from now. 10 grand. That's how much they've cut out of the taxation off the middle and working classes, because now they have the tariffs generating a lot of money. Now they have the companies generating a lot of money. It's like I try to make you understand. It's the Walmart School of Business, I like to call it, though it's not Walmart's idea. So I just say that because it's something that everybody can understand, right? Walmart's where you go because everything is least expensive. It's not about getting a millionaire to come in and buy one thing for $1 million in those kinds of stores. Walmart, they work on the premise of having 1 million people come in and spend $5 or $10, you see? The same idea holds true for when you have people that work. Rather than pay 30% tax from, say, 10% of your working population, you have 50% of your population working hard They can only pay you 5%, and you're still at a considerable amount more money. They have more in their pocket, so that stimulates more industry. The more you have to spend, the more you will spend. That's how restaurant. That's why one of the first things to go when you hit a bad recession is a restaurant and the stores, because people don't have any money to spend. By giving them money to spend, you create industry. The Liberal government seems to be against that because they are the ones that are trying desperately to make everything become about the corporations instead of making it all about the middle class. Donald Trump just gave a tax cut of 10 G's to the average individual. Mark Carney offered you $400 over the course of a year. Which model do you feel is better for you, for your standard of living? If you could copy one, or if you would accept one, which would it be? The idea that he can get away with giving that $10,000 tax cut is what I want you to understand, though. That's what I really want you to see. That how much that would impact your life so profoundly. And yet he's not even worried about it because he knows that he's got so many people working that that income will return to him no problem at all, as well as everybody will start to have jobs and get to work. And this is the secret to the middle class. This is why America is the country that everybody wants to do trade with, because it's the middle class that the rest of the world doesn't have. They have rich, 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 and 95% dirt poor. Except in the Western world, especially in the United States. The middle class is only made possible by the American system is the one that created it. They are the ones that brought it to the planet. And they are the ones that are quite wealthy as a result of it. 10 grand. Mark Carney, however, was asked about this conversation, quote unquote conversation that he had with Donald Trump and how he was feeling about the outcome of it. And a couple of questions were asked to him from the press gallery. Let's listen to that answer.
Last night I had a good conversation with President Trump, and we agreed to recommence our negotiations with a view to the 21st of July deadline that we had agreed in. Kananaskis, Minister Champagne and LeBlanc had conversations with their counterparts as well. We've restarted the discussions this morning.
Did you get anything in exchange for?
We have, to be clear, it's part of a bigger negotiation. It's something that we expected in the broader sense that would be part of a final deal. We're making progress towards a final deal. There's more to be done, to be clear. And as I just said, which answers the translation question, as I just said, is a question of timing in terms of the date for the final negotiations and when the tax was coming into effect. And it doesn't make sense to collect tax from people and then remit them back. So it provides some certainty. And as I just said, negotiations have restarted. We're going to focus on getting the best deal for Canadians. We're making progress. There's more to do, and we'll keep you updated.
The White House says you caved. Is that how it went down?
Let's just all laugh at Mark Carney for running away from him saying that you caved. We all heard him. We know he heard the guy say it. He was only a foot away and everything echoes in that room, I'm sure. But he ran from that question. He didn't turn around and say, I didn't cave. This is a complex negotiation, blah, 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 blah. He ran like the wind because he knows he turtled up. He knows that's all he can do with Donald Trump. And he put his elbows, he never had his elbows up, which I told all of you was going to happen. And for those of you that are not aware, elbows up is a term they take out of hockey for when you want to get rough and tumble in the corners. You can also get a lot of penalties when you go in elbows up. But Mark Carney put his elbows down, laid down on the ice, put it, tucked into the fetal position, or what they call in a game of hockey, turtling up. And that's what we have. We have a government that is trying desperately to make you think that there's something that they are not. Now, let's take all of that and realize that we've been talking about that for whatever it is, 20 minutes. And then look at the statement where he said, it doesn't make any sense to take a tax from somebody and only to give it back to them, carbon tax. I mean, isn't that what he was saying? Oh, no, you make more money on the carbon tax. Just pay us now and we're going to kick you out a check later and it's all going to be wonderful and cozy. And yet, all of a sudden, you tell the world that doesn't make sense. So for years, we were paying this carbon tax, and you just admit that it doesn't make any sense. It was your idea. You were the financial. I mean, don't go trying to convince me that Trudeau drafted that legislation. The man admits freely that he doesn't understand math. And so all of a sudden, when Trump says that it doesn't make any sense, that's your attack, that's your storyline. Or is it that that's what you guys crafted, and then you were hoping that people wouldn't point out that you made us pay the carbon tax only to try to convince us that you were going to give it back to us later? You were going to make us rich off the carbon tax. You were going to put money in our pockets, I believe was the slogan that you were using. It's time you understand, anybody that's out there, and for the few people that still support the Liberal Party, they were never who they claim to be. They are not who they claim to be. And you must ask yourself, what is it that they're truly after if they are not the outfit that they claim to be? And how can they improve your standard of living if they are not the outfit that they claim to be? And how much longer will you be able to sustain the economic model that you're barely holding on to now with an outfit that is not who they claim to be? I just think that we as Canadians need to understand that if we want prosperity, all we have to do is look across the border and see the formula for how it works. There's nothing, no mystery. There's no secret. Here it is being proven to be functioning and working in another system, a system that we can look down into any minute, a system that we can walk through should we desire to cross over the border and just take a look around. That's all that we have to do to understand how to make prosperity happen. Of course, we would need to get the ideology out of the way. That was the first thing Trump did, right? Was rescind all of the environmental foolishness. That's something that the Mark Carney government is not prepared to do, because that's truly what they're trying to do. They're trying to cram you into a little house so that or a little cubicle on a gigantic monolithic high rise, so that they can turn Algonquin Park into a private game reserve, while you and I struggle and share a laundry machine for the remainder of, for the rest of time, while we become super duper poor and a very few become very wealthy, like so many other countries in this world that we can mention. However, not the United States. The United States is becoming the land of opportunity, the land of the middle class. And so as I wrap, I ask you again, yes, we can see that Mark Carney is not the man for the job. We can see that the Liberal government is not the man for the job. We can see that Mark Carney is running away from the shame and the humiliation of having said a bunch of things that he cannot follow through on. We must ask ourselves, how much longer are we as a country going to have to put up with this lack of prosperity? How much longer are we going to have to watch as our standard of living bottoms out? How much longer are we as a country, as a population, are going to put up with it before we pick up the phone and say, hey, listen, I don't care what your ideology is. It's time for you to do a 180. Let's get down to business, because I want a good life for me right now, never mind 100 years from now. You can let me know what you think down in the comments. I'm going to wrap here. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.